Are you a morning person? Maybe you are, maybe you're not. However, how you start the day sets the tone for the rest of your day. And we need to keep in mind that there's no such thing as a perfect morning routine. I am beyond thrilled to be talking with my dear friend and colleague, Margaret Floyd Barry, today. She recently shared some stuff about her morning routine, and I thought it would just be perfect for us to have a conversation. So that's what we're going to do, and I invite you to listen in. Margaret, yay! Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. This is one of my favorite topics, and I have changed my thoughts on this. There's always that question, is there something you used to believe firmly that you've changed? This is one of those areas where I have changed it quite profoundly. So excited to chat.
And, one of the reasons that I wanted to talk with you is because I know by inclination, you're a morning person. My thought process and reality is that I am intrinsically a night owl, and then society, career, and motherhood forced me to become more of a morning person. And that brings a totally different perspective to how you start your day.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
so I'd love to know, how do you, for you right now, where you are in your life, what is a really wonderful way to start your day?
So now, with two young children, a dog, a cat, husband, lots of business obligations, the most important thing that I can do in the morning is be mindful about what I do. So the temptation is to just wake up and go, right? It's like you're already in it, sort of as you're getting, the alarm goes off or someone's coming into the room and needs something, and you're just like immediately in action and just going. And the difference for me, I mean, I used to have all these very complicated, time intensive, now I think of them as very luxurious morning routines that involved journaling and this and that and the other thing. Now, sometimes I'm able to do those things and it's wonderful. But as long as I take a minute before engaging with anyone, looking at my phone, even like brushing my teeth, just taking a minute to check in, knowing what's coming in the day and what would best serve me for the day, that is the single most important thing. And then it will look different every single day. But it's
Sure.
that being intentional and being mindful, not just going into autopilot, which is so easy to do, that makes all the difference.
And that sounds so centering and so wonderful, because I think you're right. So many of us just hop out of bed and get going. I know for me, as I suppose I could call myself a former night owl because I can't do that anymore. Uh, it was staying in bed until the last possible moment, like just squeaking out every ounce in bed that I could, and then springing out and racing through my day. And there was no time for self-reflection because I had, three kids, work, a husband, a dog, a cat kind of thing. And it does change as you go through different life cycles, but even just starting your day with that body awareness moment is a really wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, 100%.
One of the things that I like to do for my morning routine that I've learned actually starts the night before, which
Mhm.
is because I have become, and this is very new for me. I never used to, once we got to phones where you could have everything on your phone, I was like, great, I'm just going to put it all on my phone. It'll all be there. But my natural inclination is paper. I love paper. And our daughter, one of our daughters actually talked me into it, is I have a planner now and I get them in 6-month increments. And I do. And so I sit down the night before and I make sure I've got everything on my calendar and that I'm aware of what my day looks like before I go to bed, so that when I wake up in the morning, I can plan how much time I have for a little quiet space before I begin the rush of the day.
100%. I think that is one of the most important shifts as well, is recognizing that your morning starts the night before. So all of those, so if you're able, I'm like you, I love to plan. I love to plan on paper, and I like a journal that has an entire 2-page spread just for the day so that I can write out my calendar, even though, yes, it's on my Google calendars, it's in my phone, it's in all the places, but I like to physically write it down. I like to write my to-do list down. I like to then take that to-do list and put it in little sprints. Like I love all that. But knowing that part, as well as just what time you go to bed, what you ate for dinner, right? Like if you have a glass of wine with dinner or not, all of these things are going to influence your morning, right? And so
Yeah.
that morning really begins the night before. And if you can be intentional about that and be aware of that as you go to bed, that's going to be one of the pieces that sets you up for the next day, for good or for challenging, let's call it.
Yeah, yeah. And then, the other pieces, once we get past night before planning, whatever you're doing to start in the morning, like what would be a really luxurious, ideal something? How much time, what activities before you rush into the thick of the day?
Well, there's 3 things that for me are really, really important ingredients. I think of them ingredients just like we would in a meal. These are ingredients to the ideal morning. And it might not be before I do other things. Like there are
Mm.
realities such as with small kids, they need help, and depending on my night before, depending on a whole number of things, sometimes I'm able to get up a couple of hours before them, but that also means getting up at 4:30 in the morning. And sometimes I don't
Oh,
want to
yeah.
get up at 4:30 in the morning, or I do a lot of scheduling and interviewing things in the evenings. That's just not reasonable, right? It doesn't work out with the schedule. So when I say morning routine, it might be first thing before I do other things, but it also might just be like before I start my work day, which might take
Mm.
over a few hours. And I've gotten a lot less strict about that. It used to be like I get up and before I engage with other people or do kind of really any other thing, it's all my tasks. I don't do that anymore. I've let go of that. But there are 3 key ingredients that I find really, really set me up well. One is getting outside,
Mm.
even if that's just sitting on my front porch with a cup of tea. But
Mhm.
it's like getting outside, ideally, take the dog for a walk, go for a run, walk one of my kids to school, like just something outdoors. Second ingredient is movement. So often
Mhm.
those 2 things go hand in hand. So some kind of movement, some kind of being outdoors. And I try to do that in all weathers. We live up here in the Northeast and sometimes it's gorgeous and sometimes it's extremely not gorgeous. And that's perfect. It builds resilience in all the things. And then the third piece is space,
Mm.
meaning no inputs. So for as an example, and it doesn't have to be the whole time, but if, for example, if I walk my daughter to school and then I'm on the way back, on the way there, we're probably chatting, or I mean, sometimes not, sometimes we're both quiet, but often we're chatting. And on the way back, instead of listening to a podcast or catching up on messages or anything like that, if I can just be with myself, I notice
Mhm.
a very different level of stress, just baseline stress over the course of the rest of my day. So those 3 ingredients, outside, movement, and space, and by space I just mean no inputs.
Yeah.
A really, or it could be with somebody and we're just talking, even if my husband and I walk my daughter to school together, just walking back quietly chatting, that's
Mhm.
also space, but just not having the constant influx of information, of data, of distraction. Those 3 pieces are absolutely essential to me. And of course, if I'm able to meditate, amazing. If I'm able to journal, amazing. If I get in a full workout, amazing. But those are bonuses. The
Yeah.
3 ingredients are the key pieces. And I think that if, especially for those who are listening who have lots of commitments and obligations, I think the more flexibility we can give ourselves, the more
Mhm.
likely we are to actually achieve these things. And the more rigid we are and the more, specific with the way it looks, it just sets us up for failure.
And I love that you talk about the ability to shift in what you're doing, because I know, right now there seem to be a lot of influencers who have this, like, this is the perfect routine. Follow me as I do this. And I've learned to recognize that a lot of those are commercials, first of all, because they're selling lots of products. This is what my morning looks like. You should buy these 10 things. But the other thing is it's very rigid, and life is not rigid. Life has to be flexible. And like you, I've learned to let go of the ideal of productivity I used to feel like the more productive I could be with my time. So I had to try to be doing, 3 or 4 things at the same time, got very overwhelming, and my nervous system kind of paid the price for that.
Mhm.
And for me, I have a slightly different routine. I do like that quiet time in the morning. I like to read in the morning if I can, preferably with a cup of tea. If I'm lucky, my husband is home and will bring me a cup of tea. If he's not, I will actually go make it myself and bring it back to bed, because that 15 minutes with a cup of tea in bed reading is just wonderful. I tend to like save my movement and my nature time for my lunch break, because you've been to visit me. We have lots of walking paths here in the woods and everything. And so I like to do that in the middle of the day. And I think that just highlights that there's no one perfect thing. You need to find what works for you. But the end goal is to do whatever it is that's going to soothe your nervous system and help your brain disconnect.
100%. 100%. And I think even on a day-to-day basis, and I think we were talking about morning routines here, but I think bringing this level of intentionality and awareness throughout the whole day
Mm,
is a really beautiful piece as well, and can really enhance it. And I think how we set up our day is brilliant. And how we set up our day can help us to establish some of these patterns that we can then bring throughout the day and help us. You talk about that overwhelm and the productivity and the do. I mean, we are two peas in a pod when it comes to that stuff. And I have found that if I can have little productive I call them sprints. If I can do a sprint for several things, and then I give myself, it's actually a to do, since I'm a to do kind of person. And if it's a to do, I'll tend to do it more than if it's not. But the to do is to just sit with a cup of tea for 10 minutes, or,
mhm.
go for a walk, or, something like this that is weaving some of these practices throughout the day. I think it can really extend the benefit. And one other quick thing, you mentioned that, that idea of getting all the things on the list done and feeling like it has to be in a certain way. One of the things, have you read the book The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy?
No, I'll have to
It's
look
an
that up.
excellent book. Excellent book, The Gap and the Gain. And the key concept here is that most of us, especially high achievers, live in the gap, meaning we have goals. I love goals. Love me a goal. But we're always acutely aware of where I am now versus the gap between me and my goal. And we're just
Mm,
getting after it and getting after it and getting after it. And we might achieve goals. In fact, we do achieve goals, probably lots of them. But we pretty much the second we have achieved a goal, have a new goal, right? And so we're always in that gap between where we are now and where we're going.
mhm,
Some of the most successful and, importantly, happiest people do it the opposite. They're looking at the gain, they're looking backwards. So instead of looking towards where they're going, which is important to do, yes, but they're constantly aware of where they started from. And
mm,
so we can apply that to morning routines. And if we have a flexibility to our morning routines, we can just accumulate gains throughout the day. So it's like, oh, I took 10 seconds this morning to just like tune into my body, take a deep breath, and set an intention for the day. Gain.
mhm,
I, you know, I turned off my phone for 10 minutes on my walk home. Gain. I just took a moment to like listen to the birds on that walk. Gain. So we're accumulating gains and accumulating all
mhm.
these mini wins, which psychologically is so important to all the other pieces that we're doing. And this is not to say don't have a goal. It's
Yeah.
to say that if we can use as our reference point where we started from instead of where we are working towards, it
Mhm,
changes things in a really, like, it sounds very simple. It's actually really profound what it does. And I feel like this is, my morning routines used to be all about goals. And if I did
mm,
not do my 3 pages of morning pages by such and such a time, and then run this many miles and have showered and eat this kind of breakfast and done this level of meditation, then it was a gap.
yeah,
I didn't succeed at it. And thus all of it had happened in the perfect order, in the perfect way. Right. So I was completely
mhm.
always living in the gap, which ultimately defeats the purpose of these morning practices. So switching that means that no matter how small the step, it's a gain.
Yeah.
And that really, I think that's a really important piece to bring into this because of hearing all of the influencers of like, do it this way or you're doing it wrong. It's like, not really.
And I love that you brought that up because one of the things I think tends to happen, our society in general is constantly pushing this ideal of productivity and achievement. And like you said, once we achieve something, up, did that, what's next? There's no looking backwards to see, hey, look at how far I've come. Look at what I've accomplished. Look at how different things are now. And if we can be kinder to ourselves and go, wow, I made this commitment to shift how I was handling my morning so I could have a calmer start to my day. And in the last 30 days, 90 days, whatever, look at all these things that have changed. If we can do that, that in a way becomes its own motivation to keep looking for the gain. I'm definitely going to have to read that book.
It's a great.
But I think we forget to look backwards and see how far we've come or how things have changed. And I also frequently, when working with clients, one of the things that we run into is we forget that our lives are constantly changing. You know, like you, at one point, I had little kids in the house. That has a requirement for how your morning goes, how your day goes, what's going on. But at a certain point, they do eventually grow up and and then you have you. And so being open to that change and that personal growth is really important.
100%.
And
100%.
and so I guess one last question that I have for you is, as you're doing these morning routines, do you include your kids in any of that to try to teach them how to do this as well?
100%. And we're flexible with it, but there's definitely like connection time with them every morning. And we do, it's not formal and structured. I mean, there's the things that need to happen, right?
Mhm.
Brush the teeth, get dressed, eat breakfast. But, we really intentionally connect with them mindfully, not in a rushed get out of the house way, in a mindful way. Anytime they've got anything big or something that's really important to them happening that day, we're really intentional about sort of future pacing them through it. So they're really well set up. I mean, even something I can remember that my daughter, when she was in grade 5, she was practicing she was going to be one of the kids doing a speech at the end of the year, and she was really nervous about it. And so I talked to her about how, when she walks into the doors of her classroom and then out of the doors, every doorway she walked through for the rest of the day was going to help her get a little stronger, a little bit more confident, a little bit
Mm.
more prepared. So some of these things we can do to psychologically prepare them for their day, we're really looking at that. And then that connection time, as I said, either if one of us is walking them to school, really
Mhm.
using that time to be with them and to, my husband, we walk through this little forest on the way to our youngest's school. And, my husband and daughter have this whole, sort of fairy in the forest story going on. I actually have lost track of the plot at this point because it's gotten very complicated and fun for both of them. But I'm injured and haven't been able to walk her for a little minute. So I'm a little out of the loop on it. But they have this whole thing that they do every morning just as a bonding and connection. Or even something as simple as sitting together to eat breakfast, not just
Mhm.
as we're
Yeah.
running out the door. I think these
Mhm.
kinds of things, to recognize that how you set yourself up for the day is
Yes.
it's really important, and it can be so small. It doesn't have to be big and complicated. My eldest daughter loves to do all the things, so she would sometimes crawl into bed with me. Well, actually, back when we lived in Portland a couple of years ago, I would often journal in the morning. That was something that I was able to build into my schedule very regularly. And she started coming down and bringing one of her sketchbooks and would sit and just sketch while I was journaling. And it was just this lovely, quiet time together before everybody else was up. So, I think, yes, the more we can build our kids into this and just modeling it, and this is just what we do, as opposed to requiring them to do it. Just,
Yeah.
it just becomes part of the family culture. I think that that's a really beautiful way to set them up.
I think that's fabulous. And I just can envision the two of you sitting there together, her with her sketchbook and you with your journal. And it's also such a good time for your nervous system to just, you're getting coherence and you're getting all that calm start to your day, which really is so much better than springing out of bed and trying to race through everything that has to happen, which leaves you exhausted by the end of the day. I mean, this is giving you a start that allows you to have, hopefully, fairly consistent energy and not too much overwhelmed depending on what's going on by the time you get to the end of the day. So that's lovely.
I want to say one quick last thing. I think it's
Sure.
super important that if your day does look like everything just went sideways and you rushed out the door, stuffing breakfast into yourself and your kids' mouths as you're running out the door late, like that's also completely okay, right? Like life
Yeah,
happens.
it
I'm making
happens.
it sound like we're so intentional and conscious and thoughtful the whole way
Yeah.
through, and we strive for that. But holy cow, let me tell you, there are days where it does not look like that over here. So I
Yeah.
just want for any of the perfectionists out there, just knowing that that can be a very different situation. So
Absolutely. And actually, for some reason, that reminds me of one other thing that I wanted to share. So many years ago, I don't even remember the video, but someone talked about make your bed first thing in the morning, all of that. And then I was reading in my Healthy Readers book club that I have, we're reading The Secret History of Home Economics. And one of the things that they shared is you should not make your bed first thing in the morning. You should actually allow it to air out.
yes.
And one of the notes was go have breakfast, come back and make your bed. And if you're the kind of person that has to leave and can't go back and make your bed, let it wait till you get home.
Wow. I
I
love
love that. Yes, so much better. And it's better for you. It's better for your bedding. And also it's that permission we do not have to get it done right this second. So, and yes, not every morning is perfect.
That's
So, Margaret, thank you so much for talking with me about this. And for everybody who's watching, I hope maybe you gained one or two strategies that might help you build a morning routine that resonates for you, your personal routine. And to remember that not every day is the same and not every day is perfect, but in all we do to make today a healthy day. Bye, folks.